A 23-year-old man is dead following a shooting early Sunday morning in Pensacola, Florida. At 1:23 a.m. on the 12th of March, officers responded to a parking lot at 2370 North Palafax Street on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived, they found a man had been shot and was in a critical condition. He was transported to a local hospital, where he later died from his injuries. The victim's been identified as 23-year-old Ariel Tristan Thomas. Authorities are still investigating the circumstances surrounding the shooting. There's no known suspects at this time, and the motive for the shooting remains unclear. Authorities in Belleville, Illinois, are investigating a fatal shooting that occurred early Sunday morning. At 1:21 a.m. on the 12th of March, authorities responded to a residence at 498 South 29th Street on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived, they entered the home and found an unresponsive man with a gunshot wound. Medics tried performing life-saving measures on the man, but he is unable to be saved. A St. Clair County coroner later pronounced the man dead at 4:40 a.m. The victim was identified as 38-year-old Paul Kirby. 25 detectives from the Major Case Squad of Greater St. Louis are working on the case. No arrests have been made to date, and the motive in the shooting is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. Authorities in Dyersburg, Tennessee are looking for a 30-year-old man after allegedly held a woman captive in a locked closet for weeks. At around 1:30 p.m. on Saturday the 11th of March, authorities responded to a possible domestic complaint on Schaefer Street. Officers were informed that a man working in the area was approached by a female who reported that she had been kidnapped weeks earlier and had just escaped. Officers arrived to find the victim hiding under a new construction home in the area. The 40-year-old victim had facial cuts and was reportedly very thin, weighing under 100 pounds. The victim said that for about 2 months, she was forced to stay in a closet that was locked by some type of locking device with a cable, and was only allowed out of the closet for an hour a day. The victim was provided with very limited food and no bathroom facilities. Officers and detectives were able to locate the vacant home on Ayers Street, where the victim was being held. Evidence found included human waste inside the residence as described by the victim. 30-year-old Brenton Bell was identified by the victim as a suspect. Brenton and the victim were in a relationship, and according to the victim, it turned physically abusive and led to her being held captive. Brenton is wanted for aggravated kidnapping, and anyone with information about his location is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. A couple are behind bars after being accused of abusing their 4-month-old infant daughter. On Friday the 10th of March, 24-year-old Devon Mims and 19-year-old Sandra Van Wy were arrested at their home in the 2000 block of Mill Street in Sandusky, Ohio. Devon is charged with felonious assault and 2 counts of child endangering, while Sandra is charged with 1 count of child endangering. On the 8th of February, authorities were called to the Firelands Regional Medical Center after medical staff reported that a baby was admitted with suspicious injuries that appeared to be consistent with abuse. The child had 4 cracked ribs, a broken arm, a broken leg, 2 brain bleeds with blood clots due to damaged blood vessels between the skull and brain. The girl has trouble seeing, eating, and suffers from seizures. Due to her injuries, the baby was transported to the Cleveland Hospital that specializes in pediatrics. Devon told an investigator that he did not know how the child got rib fractures, but admitted he was rough when tickling her. Both parents said they were unaware of their child having any falls. The investigator then told them that tickling would not produce rib fractures. While speaking with the police detective, Sandra said they brought the child to the emergency room because she started choking while being fed, stopped breathing for about 10 seconds and went limp. After becoming conscious again, the girl started crying and would not stop. The detective asked the parents if there had ever been an accident in which a girl fell. Devon reportedly admitted to accidentally dropping her while she was in the bouncer, which turned out to be a baby rocker. The girl's parents told detectives that one of them was with the child at all times, and that the girl does not go to a babysitter. A Cleveland Hospital's admitting doctor noted that the injuries constituted non-accidental trauma. "This is one of the worst cases of child abuse I've seen," Sandusky Police Chief Jared Oliver said. "It was pure torture for that little baby for months," said Sandusky Police Detective Carissa Cruz, who investigated the case. The girl is now in custody of the Erie County Children's Services. The couple are both held at the Erie County Jail. Devon remains held on an $80,000 bond, while Sondra is held on a $20,000 bond. 58-year-old Albert William Bethia is behind bars after being accused of beating a man to death with a broken piece of sidewalk during an altercation. The assault occurred at around 6 p.m. on the 25th of January, around the intersection of Northwest 2nd Avenue and Northwest 8th Street in Miami, Florida, when the victim, whose name remains anonymous, allegedly walked past Albert and punched him in the neck at random. Witnesses told police that Albert grabbed a piece of broken concrete from a path nearby and tossed it at the victim's head, hitting him. He then allegedly picked up the concrete again and hit the victim in the head with it 4 more times. He then reportedly stomped on the victim's head with his boots. The victim suffered severe facial injuries and bleeding to his head and face. The victim was transported to the Jackson Memorial Hospital Trauma Center with a brain bleed and other wounds. Police located Albert in a park nearby where he was detained. He had blood all over his body, on the right side of his head, his pant legs and his boots. As he was being transported to the police station, he continuously struck and kicked the back of the officer's vehicle, but did not cause any damage to it. Albert was initially charged with aggravated battery and was released on bond on the 1st of March. On Sunday the 5th of March, the victim succumbed to his injuries. On Tuesday the 7th of March, Albert was rearrested after the victim died, and his charge was upgraded to second-degree murder with a weapon. He is held at the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Centre without bond. A 21-year-old pregnant woman from the Belmont-Cragen neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois, was fatally shot by a gang of drug dealers that she was trying to rob. Genesis Escobar had organised a heist with her boyfriend. At around 1 p.m. on Monday the 6th of March, she climbed into a car to complete a drug transaction near her home in the 5200 block of West Montana Street. Her unnamed boyfriend, who was standing outside, tried to rob those on the other end of the deal. During an exchange of gunfire, her intended victim shot her in the shoulder, back and hand. It's unclear if she was armed with any sort of weapon or how the woman came to target the car's occupants. Her killers then threw her body onto the street and dumped hundreds of dollars on top of her before speeding off. Genesis' boyfriend grabbed some of the cash and fled, leaving the gasping expectant mother on the ground. She was rushed to a nearby hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Her baby daughter, expected to be born in 2 months, was also killed in the shooting. Police are investigating the matter, and no one is in custody. On Friday the 3rd of March, 26-year-old Trey James Rudolph was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 6 years, in connection to the shaking death of an infant girl. On the morning of the 4th of August 2020, Trey, the boyfriend of the aunt of 13-week-old Jasmine Wilkes, shook the infant out of frustration at his unit in Fowler Street in Hamilton, South New South Wales, Australia. He then wrapped her up, put her in a bouncer and left her to die from her catastrophic injuries. Rudolph told investigators that he was sleep deprived, had been using ice and smoking weed the night before, and was stressing out. He said, "I shook her a little bit. I gave her a cuddle and put her back down in her bouncer. I thought she was sleeping." The baby's mother, Tiani Wilkes Partridge, arrived at the premises at around 9 a.m. that morning. After she called early and Trey told her that everything was fine and that the child was asleep. And just after 10 a.m, the child's aunt checked in on Jasmine, where she discovered Jasmine was cold to touch and wasn't breathing. When paramedics arrived, she was limp and cold, and she was taken to the John Hunter Hospital, where she was pronounced dead at just before midday. The child's death was caused from head and neck injuries, and she was likely alive for about 30 minutes after the act of vigorous shaking, which could have lasted up to 10 seconds. Trey was arrested 4 months later and was charged with murdering the baby, and also faced a charge of sexual assault of a child under 10. He was set to head to trial, but the Director of Public Prosecutions dropped the charges after he pleaded guilty to the alternate charge of manslaughter. With time already served, Trey will be eligible for release in December of 2026. A 25-year-old California woman was arrested after allegedly dumping a newborn baby inside a gas station trash can and fleeing the scene. At around 3:30 p.m. on Thursday the 9th of March, authorities responded to the Chevron Extra Mile gas station at 944 West Orangethorpe Avenue in Fullerton, California, after one of the gas station employees discovered a crying baby inside a bag that had been placed in a restroom garbage can and called 911. First responders performed life-saving measures on the newborn and transported the child to a local hospital, where he remains in a critical condition. Through further investigation, detectives identify Vanessa Maldonado as the newborn's mother. At 1:45 a.m. the following morning, police served a search warrant at Vanessa's apartment in the 400 block of West Orange Thorpe Avenue, roughly half a mile down the road from the gas station, and she was arrested. During an interview with detectives, Vanessa made statements indicating that the child was hers. Investigators have yet to determine whether Vanessa gave birth at the gas station. She's been charged with attempted murder and abuse of a child. California has a safely surrender baby law, which allows parents to surrender newborns at a fire or police station or other designated sites without fear of prosecution within 72 hours of the birth. 30-year-old Miroslav Mashev is charged with capital murder in the death of his 69-year-old mother Lilia Masheva. At around 10:45 a.m. on the 2nd of March, Lilia was found dead by first responders at the Royale Apartments at 9701 Stella Link Road in Houston, Texas. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences determined that Lilia died from strangulation. The killing allegedly stemmed from her refusal to give her son a 2015 Honda Civic. After the killing, Miroslav fled with the car, a wallet and a cell phone. Miroslav was later arrested on the 10th of March by Sutton County Sheriff's deputies in Sonora, Texas during a traffic stop. He's been held at Sutton County Jail and will be extradited back to Harris County. The investigation into the matter continues. A man has been arrested in connection to his toddler son's death after allegedly leaving him alone in a hot car for 5 hours. At 1:17 p.m. on Monday the 6th of March, authorities responded to reports of a 2-year-old child who had been left inside a parked car for hours along the 1700 block of Southeast Aries Lane in Port St. Lucie, Florida. The child's father, 37-year-old James Fidel, called 911 after he realised he forgot to take the child out of the vehicle that morning, as the outdoor temperatures soared to 83 degrees Fahrenheit. James reportedly told police he dropped his other 4 kids off at school and came back home at 8:15 a.m. to begin work from his office there. He said he was responsible for taking the children to school because he and his girlfriend were sharing a car, as his was in the shop. It wasn't until 1:15 p.m. when James came back to collect a package from the SUV that he noticed the toddler in the third row of the vehicle, unconscious but still had his eyes open in the back seat. The child's body temperature reportedly hit 107 degrees. When first responders arrived, they performed life-saving measures on the child and transported him to a local hospital, but was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Authorities said that a search warrant verified that the rear seat reminder safety alarm would have alerted James that he left a child in the car. James admitted to authorities that he never paid attention to the warning. Investigators said that a nearby Ring camera video from a neighbour's home revealed that James showed no urgency in getting his child out of the SUV. James was arrested and charged with leaving a child unattended in a motor vehicle, causing great bodily harm, and is held at the St. Lucie County Jail. If convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison. A Minnesota man is behind bars for allegedly killing a convicted child predator he believed had stalked his daughter in the past. 27-year-old Levi Axtell is charged with murder and the beating death of 77-year-old Lawrence Scully at his home in Grand Marais on Wednesday the 8th of March. After the fatal attack, Levi arrived at the Cook County Sheriff's Office covered in blood and put his hands on his head and said that he murdered Lawrence with a shovel. He told deputies that he hit him 15 to 20 times with a shovel and then finished him off with a large moose antler. At around 5 p.m. that day, deputies entered Lawrence's home and found him surrounded by blood and obviously dead with major head trauma. The medical examiner noticed that Lawrence had defensive wounds to his arms. A neighbour also called 911 to report the incident after watching a van pull up at Lawrence's residence and smash a vehicle before running home. A witness also added that he heard screaming. In 1979, Lawrence was convicted of sexually assaulting a 6-year-old girl in Minnesota. He was released from prison in 1982. In 2018, Levi said that Lawrence was stalking and attempting to groom his 22-month-old daughter at the Grand Marais daycare by parking his van at the facility. Levi sought an order of protection against Lawrence, which was granted, but then dismissed several weeks later. 2 years later, Levi posted a comment on Facebook stating, "Only cure for a pedophile, a bullet." In July 2020, Lawrence was committed to a mental asylum, but was released the following year and was placed on antipsychotic drugs. Levi is held at the Cook County Jail and his bail was set at $1 million. 44-year-old Jason Smith is behind bars after taking a naked stroll through Palm Beach, Florida. The incident occurred on Wednesday the 8th of March when an employee from Taboo called authorities to say a nude man had walked westbound past the restaurant at 221 Worth Avenue in full view of a number of customers. When police arrived, bystanders quickly pointed out the offender to officers. Jason told police he didn't know where he left his clothes and refused to give his name or date of birth. Officers took him into the police headquarters for questioning. After multiple requests, Jason eventually provided his name. However, he told police he didn't have a social security number or an identification card. He told officers that he resided on a different earth before telling them he lived in West Palm Beach. Jason was charged with indecent exposure, disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. He later entered a not guilty plea, and his bond was set at $500. Authorities believe a man may have been living with a corpse for months before taking his own life as deputies entered his home in Houston, Texas on Saturday evening. Elton Bell, the neighbor next door, made the initial call to the Harris County Sheriff's Office for a welfare check. He said he was mowing the grass beside the house and into the backyard, and he noticed a bunch of flies that were above normal size. At around 8 p.m. on the 11th of March, deputies responded to a residence located at 16827 Kilwinning Drive. When officers arrived, they also saw the flies and noticed a fetid stench emanating from the residence, prompting them to enter the home. As they made entry into the house, they heard one gunshot. They then found the body of a man in his 60s in the bedroom dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. In an adjoining bedroom, they found another man in his 60s who had been dead for at least several months, and his body was severely decomposing. We're pretty shocked. It's really horrifying. I mean, this guy was 20 feet from my house lying in the room, Elton said. Linda Meadows, who lives across the street, said her daughter heard a gunshot, prompting the family to come outside to see what happened. If you ever smelled a rat in your wall, it's awful. As soon as they opened the door, you could smell it as soon as the wind blew across the street. We knew something was really wrong, she said. Neighbours said the two men were fairly private and mostly kept to themselves. Right now, the relationship between the two men is unclear, but authorities said it appears that the two were living together in the house. Harris County Forensic Science will work on determining the cause of death of the decomposed body. The identification of both men has not been released. The investigation into the matter continues. A 43-year-old Albuquerque, New Mexico man is accused of fatally beating his 45-year-old girlfriend. At around 9 a.m. on Sunday the 5th of March, authorities responded to a home in the 1900 block of Coe Road in South Valley on reports of an unresponsive woman. When deputies arrived, they found 45-year-old Michaela Novick on the floor dead with a fractured skull. It appeared a struggle had taken place in the living room, with broken glass and household items strewn across the floor. Investigators also located a single spent bullet casing near her body. Michaela's boyfriend, Jarrett Attle, had a scratch and bruising above his left eye and bruising on both of his knuckles. He reportedly told deputies that he drank with Michaela during the night, breaking 6 years of sobriety. He told deputies he went to sleep in his bedroom and woke up several times during the night, seeing Michaela in the same position on the couch. He said that he called 911 at around 8:30 a.m. when he tried to wake her up and noticed blood coming from her nose. When asked about his injuries, Jarrett said he could not recall how he got them and that he fell a lot. A medical examiner determined that a homicide had occurred and Michaela died from blunt force trauma. Deputies arrested Jarrett and he's been held without bond at the Bernalillo County Jail on a charge of open murder. The investigation into the matter continues. 40-year-old Angela West and 36-year-old Jamira Buford of Waynesville, Missouri, are behind bars and are accused of killing a 5-year-old girl. The two women were in a relationship, and the 5-year-old girl was a biological child of one of those women. At around 8 a.m. on the 7th of March, authorities were notified after a boy found his younger 5-year-old sister had choked on a sock and was laying on the floor unconscious and unresponsive at their home. Officers responded to the residence at 710 Washington Street and made contact with two women who were told that there was a deceased child in their house. Shamaya said that she found the child deceased under a blanket in the living room. Officers entered the home and found the unresponsive victim with ligature marks on her wrists, ankles and neck. A blood-covered sock was found nearby, along with 3 lengths of rope. The Pulaski County coroner pronounced the girl dead at 8:50 a.m. A reporting child told police that his stepmother woke him up, and he noticed that his younger sister was tied to a futon. The child said that she would steal food in the middle of the night, so Angela and Shamara would tie the child up as punishment. One of the children told police that Angela had a bad back and would ask the kids for help to tie the girl to the futon. During an interview, Shamara told officers that the child continued to steal food, and they tried numerous things to get her to stop. Angela and Shamara allegedly duct taped the child's wrists and ankles and began hog-tying the child. To keep her quiet, they reportedly placed a sock in her mouth. Angela and Shamara were arrested and charged with felony murder, first-degree involuntary manslaughter, endangering welfare and abuse of a child. They remain held at the Pulaski County Jail without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. 36-year-old Amon Mandrell Jones is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting co-worker 25-year-old Calvin Richard Lester Jr. On the morning of Tuesday the 7th of March, Calvin's unresponsive body was found in the parking lot of Fat Jr.'s Grill at 4900 Womack Road in Sanford, North Carolina. Calvin had a single gunshot wound and was pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives began searching for an unknown man in connection to the shooting. He was driving a dark four-door Toyota Camry with front-end damage. Authorities identified the suspect as Amon, and he was taken into custody later that day. Investigators said that Amon and Calvin worked together at manufacturing business Caterpillar, which is in walking distance of the diner about a quarter of a mile down the road. The shooting occurred after the 2 men got off work. Fat Jr.'s was closed at the time. A motive in the shooting is unclear. Amon is charged with murder, and he's held at Lee County Jail without bail. 18-year-old John Konichi of Bennington, Vermont, faces aggravated assault charges after allegedly breaking his 1-year-old daughter's collarbone. On Wednesday, the 8th of March, the child was brought to the hospital. He told different stories to doctors and police about how his daughter got hurt. John's father also alleged that his son was lying about the injury and said that John had been abusive towards the baby on several instances in the past. John later admitted to Vermont State Police troopers that his daughter was crying incessantly on his lap. He said the child's mother left the room. He squeezed her inward from both sides of her body and heard a pop sound, causing a broken clavicle. John admitted that his anger took control of him, but called the injury accidental. He pleaded not guilty in the Bennington court on Thursday and was released on conditions that he stays at his father's house, not see his child or the child's mother, and cannot be with any other children under 16 without adult supervision. If John is found guilty of aggravated assault, he faces up to 15 years behind bars. A gunman in Germany has fatally shot 7 people at a Jehovah's Witness worship hall in Hamburg before turning the gun on himself. The incident occurred at 9 p.m. on Thursday the 9th of March. 8 other people were wounded, including a 7 months pregnant woman who lost her unborn daughter. The deceased adult victims were 4 dead men and 2 women aged between 33 and 60. The gunman's been identified as Philip Fuzz. The 35-year-old, a German citizen and former Jehovah's Witness, began shooting through a window at the hall, where dozens of people were gathered before entering. Members of a special forces unit arrived 4 minutes after the shooting began and stormed the hall and chased Philip. He ran up a flight of stairs and fatally shot himself. Authorities said that Philip left the Jehovah's Witness community voluntarily about 1.5 years ago on bad terms. Philip had a permit as a marksman since December of 2022. The Hamburg shooter was known to police, who had visited his apartment prior to the attack in response to an anonymous letter received in January, raising concerns about his state of mind. Also indicated that he had directed his anger towards the Jehovah's Witnesses. But Philip persuaded officials not to take his semi-automatic pistol away, which he legally owned. During the visit, authorities noticed the weapon was left out and asked Philip to properly secure the weapon before leaving. Authorities in Canton, Ohio are investigating a shooting that left a man dead on Friday. At 10:44 a.m. on the 10th of March, police responded to the intersection of Navarre Road Southwest and Greenfield Avenue Southwest and reported gunfire. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a red Ford Taurus with heavy damage to the front left side, with the engine still running. Inside the car, they found 55-year-old Stephen Troyer unresponsive in the driver's seat with multiple gunshot wounds. Paramedics rushed him to the Altman Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 11:13 a.m. The motive in the shooting is unclear, and no arrests have been made to date, as the investigation into the matter continues. A Texas stalker broke into a Redmond, Washington home early Friday morning and fatally shot 33-year-old Zoray Zadegi and her husband 35-year-old Mohammed Nazeri before turning the gun on himself. At around 1:45 a.m. on the 10th of March, the 38-year-old trucker, identified as Ramin Kader Karim Razari, climbed through the window of the couple's home, located in the 16,700 block of Northeast 89th Street. He then shot Zoray and Mohammed. The woman's mother, who was also in the house, managed to escape and ran to the neighbour's place to call 911. When police arrived at around 2 a.m, they found Mohammed unresponsive, lying on the front lawn with a gunshot wound to his chest. They attempted CPR, but he was later pronounced dead at the scene. When officers entered the residence, they found Ramin and Zoray dead inside. Redmond Police spokeswoman Jill Green said that Ramin died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound after he'd been stalking Zoray for many months. Ramin reportedly listened to Zoray's tech podcasts and began communicating with her, and they struck up a kind of friendship and talk, she said. Ramin was divorced with one child, and the two met in person in 2022. Zoray hid some of the interactions from her husband. Ramin reportedly showed up at the couple's home uninvited, delivered flowers, and even promised to send a musical band to play outside. He would park down the street, or stay in local motels near the property in hopes of catching a glimpse of her. Ramin began to just send a lot of messages to the point that Zoray decided to disengage. Zoray filed a no-contact order last month. In it, she stated that Ramin had bursts of anger and is completely delusional, and these delusions make me fear for my life and the lives of my loved ones. She also said that police could not serve the trucker with a no-contact order because we weren't able to make contact with him in Texas. It's just unfortunate that the stalking ended in such a tragic way, she said. Footage of a murder suspect escaping from a courthouse has just been released. The defendant, 28-year-old Eddie Villalobos Jr., appeared in the Washington County Courthouse in Hillsboro, Oregon, for jury selection at 11 a.m. on the 28th of February, after allegedly stabbing two men, killing one of them who was his mother's partner 2 years ago. Security camera footage released to the public by the Washington County Sheriff's Office on Thursday shows Eddie in the courtroom guarded by two officers, and he's wearing a blue shirt and dark trousers. One of the officers removes Eddie's handcuffs and leg shackles, in line with legal requirements for court session. Eddie then scoots behind two desk chairs and runs out the courtroom door with no one blocking the path to the door. The footage then shows Eddie racing down multiple hallways and through doors as two officers chase him and bystanders get out of their way. After he managed to get away and officers began searching for him, Eddie was found hours later hiding in a closet with a blanket over his head in a vacant apartment he broke into. His trial's been rescheduled for September. He faces additional charges of first-degree burglary and second-degree escape. Sergeant Danny Pietro, a spokesman for the Washington County Sheriff's Office, said his agency is reviewing the incident and will use training to address the lessons learnt. The two officers who are guarding Eddie remain on regular duty. "60-year-old Rodolfo Pazamaya is accused of fatally shooting 43-year-old Dante Dwayne Welch in Oak Grove, Kentucky on Sunday morning. At around 11:20 a.m. on the 5th of March, Dante and his toddler were sitting in the vehicle, parked in the driveway of his home at 227 New Gritton Avenue, when an altercation broke out. A witness reported seeing neighbour Rodolfo fatally shoot Dante. It's unclear what started the fight. Police arrested Rodolfo at his home, where officers located the suspected murder weapon. The following morning, Rodolfo was arraigned in court on charges of murder and wanton endangerment. He pleaded not guilty to the charges and is held at the Christian County Jail on a $500,000 bond. A preliminary hearing is scheduled for the 13th of March. 32-year-old Sean Sanderson is in custody hours after being accused of fatally stabbing his brother and injuring his mother inside a suburban home in Melbourne, Australia on Wednesday morning. Sean's 65-year-old mother was stabbed in her neck and was rushed to the Royal Melbourne Hospital in a serious but stable condition. Her 29-year-old son was also stabbed and ran across the street to a private hospital to try and get help, but succumbed to his injuries outside. And just after 8 a.m. on the 8th of March, authorities responded to Willoughby Street in Reservoir On reports of the stabbing, and identified Sean as a suspect. Initially, a team of heavily armed police surrounded the residence and tried to negotiate with Sean through a megaphone to come outside. 2 hours later, after storming the premises, they realised he was not home, and an extensive search began for him. At 2:40 p.m, officers located Sean on the corner of Murray Street and St George's Road in Preston, and he was arrested. He was barefoot, had a gash to his cheek, and was found with a wad of cash on him. He was taken to the Heidelberg police station for questioning, where he faces multiple charges including murder. The investigation into the matter continues. Police are investigating the fatal shooting of a woman in Indianapolis, Indiana early Monday morning. At around 2 a.m. on the 6th of March, home surveillance video recording captured a truck turning off South Arlington Avenue and onto Oak Avenue in the Irvington neighborhood, followed by a single gunshot. Moments later, a man began yelling for help and neighbors called 911. When the police arrived at the scene, they found an unresponsive woman lying in the middle of the street with a gunshot wound. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The Marin County Coroner's Office identified the victim as 36-year-old Dorothy Brinker. Police determined that the man who was at the scene was a person of interest, and he was taken into custody for questioning. Police said that the man and Dorothy knew each other, but would not state what their relationship was. Witnesses claimed the violence was domestic related. The investigation into the matter continues. 58-year-old Jerome Booth is behind bars after allegedly shooting 2 men on Sunday morning. At around 3 a.m. on the 5th of March, authorities responded to a gas station on the intersection of West Washington Street and Holt Road in Indianapolis, Indiana, on a report of a man shot. When officers arrived, the victim told police that he ran to the gas station for help after being shot in the neck by his father-in-law Jerome, following a dispute involving the victim's wife. The wounded man was conscious and alert, and medics transported him to a local hospital. Police tracked Jerome down to a home a block away, along Rockville Road, where they found a second victim, 39-year-old William Hoskins Jr. dead in the trunk of an SUV. Willie was a friend of the wounded victim. Police located the suspected murder weapon behind the home in some bushes. Jerome was arrested for murder, but refused to explain why the shooting took place. He's been held without bond.